All right. So we've got how to do these very intricate little patterns and mimic some of the digital rendering from the specific character. So you can tell this is digitally rendered. The pattern is really, really flat on top of it, and they've definitely used gradients and fades on it. So we're going to try to mimic it. As you can see, I painted the whole thing hot pink first, added in this dark shadow at the bottom, which I made by mixing brown and then reds and hot pink to add a little bit of warmth and plumminess to it. And then using some streaking motions, lots of little strokes that are all running vertically to help emphasize that sort of grainy striation that it's got going on. We're going to add a little bit more pink coming down into the brown to keep mimicking that texture. So I'm using a little tiny rigger brush for that, and I'm just adding either a little bit of white to make it more opaque if I want it to be more opaque, or even keeping it fairly translucent, just to soften the edge from the brown into the pink. Now there's also this little like pink heart where the striations stop and it's sitting in front of it. Put a base in with this, it's too translucent and way too pink. We're actually going to add a little bit of yellow into our pink and a little bit of white to help get that more peachy tone. This printout is also a little faded and odd compared to the original, so I'm watching the original on my computer while I'm doing it too. So we'll bump up the colors to match that. That's better. I'm going to continue the skirt like there isn't a little purse. We're going to ignore that. So I'm not carrying the bottom of that heart all the way through. You can see that that brown definitely comes up over it. We're just basing in that little top part. Now here I've got a little bit of extra red added in, a little bit of glazing medium so that we can heat up this bottom layer. To me it's a little too pink, but also a little too cool. So we're gonna add in some pinkish red. You can see I'm continually keeping my strokes running the same direction so that we get that, I don't know, it almost looks like a scraping texture. It's very much a digital technique. Where you can still paint it though, that's fine, we're fine. So we're going to mix up the lilac color of the print itself. So I'd begin by sketching it out. I had it sketched before I painted the base layers so I can still see the indents of the pencil line. We're going to count on that. It's lilac in the computer rendering, so I'm mixing quite a bit of white into it because that's going to help us get it opaque, even though I've got also quite a bit of gel medium in it to get it to flow really nicely with this little tiny brush. So there's a heavier line, and then there's a flatter, thinner line floating just outside of it. I'm using the little tiny brush. The pattern is also painted pretty much entirely flat, like they just posted a pattern on top of this and then added the shaping on after. So you can just paint the pattern repeating fairly flat. You don't think about how it would interact with the folds or the textures of the skirt. These are applied very flat. By hand painting them, we're going to have a slightly more organic quality, but if you want it to be perfect, you certainly can make it that way. Just draw it out really carefully, do a lot of planning in advance. Has these little interior details. This brush is itty bitty, and we know that when we have itty bitty brushes, they run out of paint fast. And also sometimes they don't make nice fluid lines unless the paint has a nice amount of either water or gel medium in it. Since we don't want it to be entirely translucent, I've gone with gel medium, but that's going to be your best friend in making these little tiny details. And you want to not add so much gel medium that it's entirely transparent. The white is helping us a lot with that. With this being a pastel color, anything that has white in it is going to be more opaque. So you can see that the pattern kind of had a repeat. There maybe should have been another fern in between these two on the side. It didn't fit. I'm just going to skip it. I should have sketched this out a little bit better beforehand. But you will. But also if it were on a real dress, we wouldn't see the perfect pattern repeating because it would be going into the folds of the skirt and the different things would be disappearing and we'd see it in little broken up pieces, right? So that's a nice base for the pinkish purpley pattern. Since as it's drying, it's going to lose some of its presence because as it dries, it loses the quality of the gel medium. So I'm going to bump up a couple of the lines while I'm going through, and we're also going to start defining the highlights that actually give this dress shape. So the highlights and shadows are what break the pattern up and make it into something that actually has folds and shape. They used a slightly lighter version of the same color to do the highlights on the edges of the panels, but I'm basing them in with the exact same color, and then I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit more white to it and use that now to paint highlights on top of it, so they're going to mix together. But that way it's kind of low stakes to do it with a color similar to the pattern first, so that we don't feel maybe as intimidated. They also use little highlight hash marks. You can see at the front edge as the skirts turn towards, the wrinkles turn towards the light. And those go on top of the pattern. So you want to paint the pattern first and then do this kind of line work on top of it, which if we were thinking digitally, that would make a lot of sense. You could float the line work on the top layer. Now I'm mixing another section of the brown, that kind of plum brown that I mixed for the bottom, and we're using that to be the shadow. So you put those lines right next to the highlight lines so that it goes from one straight into the other, and that creates the fold in this style at least. Once again, I've got quite a bit of medium in it, so I can use my itty bitty brush and actually travel for more than like one tiny eighth of an inch without too much dragging. But you can see how having that highlight with the little hash across the front right next to a dark line of shadow helps to give this more shape than it had when it was just a flat pattern, right? So I'm going to go ahead and mix some yellow, a little bit of orange, and some medium and some white for opacity. And we will do the little yellow details. These to me seem much more random, much more organic, so it was probably a different layer of pattern that they maybe just put on top. So I'm just going to make some little shapes, some little whoop-de-woos. Occasionally there's something that actually looks like a flower. Like here, I think there's a little flower with something in the middle. So we'll do dots around a little tiny dot. If you can't tell what a pattern is, it's harder to draw it. Our brains really, really want to know the solution so that they can help us find it. But if you're just making it up, then mimic the rhythm, the density, the shape, the organic quality. Find something in it that you can feel like you've got a grounding point in, and then just mimic that. You can see I added a few of those little striations with the yellow because I see that in the original to help us get that like pixelated feeling across the top. A few thin purple patterns are showing through to me, like there's a ghost layer. So I put more gel medium into the purple, so these will be less present. They're going to be more transparent, but there's some swirls and loop-de-loos up at the top here. Mixing up a little bit more of the red color to help outline that heart, give it a little stronger presence. So that's the background red that we used in striations, but we're going to create a defined edge with it. Sorry, mixing color just off camera. I also want a little bit more of a highlight color across the top edge so that there's multiple colors inside that heart, not just one flat one. Remembering that mixing a little tiny amount of yellow into your pink helps get that peachy quality, otherwise it's all going to feel very cold toned. These are purple on the computer one, though they're blotchy in this printout, so I went ahead and do them purple, just for the sake of being able to look at them next to the print, right? Now I'm gonna bump those shadows up because to me they're not feeling as present as they could. Partially it's an opaque thing, and partially it's just making sure that you have a really nice crisp shadow line right next to a crisp highlight line. That pretty much does us. You can pull a little bit of the brown, you can use it with some gel medium or water if you want to feather that edge. And we're done. I hope that helps. Good luck.